Now that we've completed our text block, you can adjust the tapes so that they're in the center of the structure just by pulling on them in one direction or the other. Just be careful not to pull them all the way out. It's impossible to get them back in to your text, into the sewing. We have this lovely sheet of paper. It's been folded in half just because it's so long and I needed to fit it into your packets. This folded sheet of paper is the same height as the text block and quite long. We're gonna end up trimming some of this off. Essentially, it's just gonna double back on itself and act as a slightly heavier cover structure. You can come in here and you can put with your pencil just a pencil mark right where it's folded on that fold line. We will get back to this in a moment. Our job currently is to measure the thickness of our text block. And I'm going to measure just by giving this a little gentle squeeze. I'm not really muscling this too hard, but I'm also not just letting it be at full relaxation mode either. So I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna carefully measure and I'm getting 1.3 centimeters. And just to check, I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna do the same measurement. And this one I get 1.25. So 1.3 seems like a good measurement to me. Again, I'm not fully relaxed, but I'm not doing a death grip situation either. Death grip measurement is about 1.1. So I'm okay with giving this a 1.2 or a 1.3. Your measurements may be slightly different from that, depending on how thick your thread is. And of course, if you're not using the paper from the kit, the thickness of the paper can also affect the thickness of your book structure. So use your best judgment, but keep that number in mind. We are gonna take that number, whatever it is. So for me, it's 1.3. And I'm just gonna measure from this pencil mark over 1.3 centimeters. And I'm gonna do the exact same thing on the other half. And I'm going to come in here with my bone folder and I'm going to score on that pencil line. This is nice thick paper, so it'll take a nice fold. I'm gonna flop that over, put a nice crease in it, and then make sure that I'm just lined up flush at the top and bottom here. And I'm gonna take my bone folder and really establish that crease, that fold. So now what I have is basically the wrapper for my book. And it will be a little snug if you do it like this because the tapes are included in that bulk. And when we finish our book, they won't be. Now, hopefully you still have your scrap of from your punching jig. Essentially, you can either use those same measurements to do this, or you can just use the punching jig itself. These are identical. So I could go ahead and measure, or I could use this punching jig. It's entirely up to you, whatever you feel more accurate about. I'm having a little hard time seeing those holes because of low contrast issues. So I have my math. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna use my math on here. I went ahead and I did my measuring. And the critical measurements here are really where the tapes are. So you actually don't need to measure these other places, but where the tapes are is important. What we're gonna do in that location, and I've put little X's on there, is we're gonna cut 2 windows out of the paper. And if you feel like you can freehand this, go ahead. I am gonna make sure, now that I'm looking at my knife, that I have a sharp blade when I do this. And I am gonna put my sharp blade in a sharps container, if I can find it, that I'll dispose of at a later date. Sometimes when I'm doing this process, if I want very crisp corners, I will come in here with my awl and I will go ahead and I will punch in a couple of places, just so that when I'm cutting with my knife knows where to stop. But then I also end up with nice corners of my cuts. So all I'm left doing now is connecting those dots with each other. I'm just gonna make some little cuts. If you've done this right, you'll have a couple of nice little windows put in here. Oh, the corner doesn't want to come undone. All right. We're going to end up placing this book in and out of the covers a couple of times. But usually what I do is I grab my book by the tapes and I plunk the book or the covers onto those tapes, or just shove those tapes into the book cover. Now we just want to make sure that we cut those wide enough. If they're not wide enough, you can go back in and massage, just trim them a little bit bigger if need be. These look pretty decent to me. And what's going to happen is our tapes are going to come and wrap around and tuck back into the cover at some point. I'm going to jog my text block into the absolute back of that spine so there's no gap in this area anymore. And I'm going to work on where I'm going to fold back the covers. That's my first step. So one of the things I can do is I'm looking at my text block and I'm making sure this doesn't move. I usually do this with the other cover shut, but it's very hard to show what I'm doing while I'm in there. I'm gonna put a little measurement there and there with my pencil, and it's an estimate right now. Nothing is set in stone. And I'm gonna do the same thing to the other side. And I'm gonna split the difference essentially. So what that looks like is here and here. And I am just, for the record, about up 2 millimeters, let's say 1 millimeter outside of where that text block ends. I'm going to remove my text block and I'm going to check the math now. So over here I have 11, over here I have 11, over here I have 11. It looks like 11 is our magic number. And over here I'm just shy of 11, so I'm going to make this come out to exactly 11. Actually, I'm right on the money with that one too. So this is very easy. Sometimes it's not that accurate. And you're just gonna have to figure out what that measurement is by, you can always go back and double check to make sure that nothing wiggled while you were folding it. So I'm gonna put a nice little score mark here and give this another fold. I'm gonna get back to doing the extreme crease in that in a moment, and I'll show you why. And I'm going to do the same to this flap as well. So before I give this the really good crease in here, this is what I know. I know that my text block is gonna go in here. I know that that's the front cover and that I want this to be a double layer of paper. But I know that I also don't want it to get jammed on the other matter that's gonna be in this corner of this crease over here. So I usually like to cut this a couple millimeters shy of whatever that distance was. So I'm gonna add on, I also like even math. I'm gonna add on 10.5 centimeters. And I'm going to trim at that place with my knife. So right here is where I'm gonna trim. Now what do they always say? Measure twice, cut once. So I'm gonna double check to make sure that that clears enough space. And it does, it looks actually quite nice. So this may take a couple strokes to get through the paper. That's normal. I trim this off. And so what that gives me is this ability. So I can fold this down and crease that quite nicely. That's gonna allow me some nice coverage and some extra stability in the cover when everything gets finished. I'm gonna do the exact same thing on this side. This is where we are currently with our book. It's starting to look a little bit more like the final structure. Our last task is to weave these tapes back into the cover. And so this binding is a non-adhesive binding, meaning there's no glue involved in it. Everything is gonna stay together just with weaving and with sewing. The sewing portion we already have. So the weaving portion is what we can do now. I'm going to show you how to weave these back into the cover, and sometimes what I like to do after that I weave them back in is do another little exit and entry into the book cover. So we're going to work on that. How do you do that? We're going to take our text block back out of our book. This stencil should look familiar. I'm just going to use these measurements once again to measure, and this is on the outer spine, or the outer fold, I'm sorry, that we just made. I'm going to fold up the rest of the book so I can have this at least kind of close to my eyes so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to use the same math that we used on our windows that we cut. Now, if we had extraordinarily long tapes, we could do weavings all the way out to here, but we don't. Our tapes only go so far. So essentially what I like to do is I'm just going to have them weave out about here, and you don't have to draw this, and then weave back in somewhere around here, and that will be enough space for us. See, I'm leaving those arrows here so you can see what I am doing at this point. So again, these outer edges aren't that important, but these interior spaces where the boxes are cut are. Basically, I'm measuring out, what is this, about 5 centimeters from the spine folds. You can eyeball this, or you can be very specific about this. You can always go back and erase these lines later. So draw them light. These are just guidelines. They're going to help you establish where your weavings are and where your tapes are going to go. And for some reason I drew that one all the way across. Our next step is to mark where we want our tapes to re-enter the cover. And you have to keep in mind we're working on the inside of the cover, and our tapes are going to be outside on that side. So the tapes are going to be coming out of here, and we want them to re-enter the book. So we're working with physics here. We don't want our tapes to come back in so close that they're going to rip through to this window. And we have a little bit of space to work with, so we're going to play with that a little bit. You can measure down here and then just do sort of a cross stripe as well. And this part is completely up to you what the math is on it. I'm going to do 2 centimeters here and 2 centimeters there. And I'm going to mirror that on the other half as well. So on both sides, it'll be identical where they re-enter the book. And I'll draw those lines so you can understand where they're going to come in. So they're going to come in here and here. And they're going to come in here and here. Okay, so there, those 4 spots is where they're going to re-enter. Then what I would like to do on one of the covers is to have them leave the book and re-enter the book again. And the process for deciding where that happens, again, it's the same process. It's very arbitrary. It's completely up to you. It's aesthetic. Our only limitations that we're working on is the length of this tape. So everything has to be accomplished. Let's think about that. Everything has to be accomplished essentially by this point here. We do want to give ourselves at least enough room to get our tape to re-enter back in and stay in. So this is a little bit close to the edge. I would say somewhere around here is probably our safer bet. So within this distance, we're gonna have 2 more cuts made. So let's figure out what that distance is. It's about 3 centimeters. So let's keep our math easy. We're gonna mark, starting from here, 1.5 centimeters and then 1.5 centimeters. And I'm gonna do the same on this side. And we'll do something different on the other half, so you can get a sense of what other things can be done. So we'll have an entry here, it's gonna exit here, and then it will re-enter here, and we can put those tapes to rest in this place over here. So we can go ahead and punch those holes. And cut the little slats. So again, this hole punching business is completely optional. I like to do it because I think it just helps with the weaving process of the tapes. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll come in from the front side and really make those holes a little bit more memorable. You just want to be careful you're not going to dent your paper while you're doing this, or of course tear it. So then you'd have to start over. Okay, so I'm just going to make little slits between those intersections. I'll turn that back over so you don't get confused. Please make sure you have a sharp knife. What ends up happening is these holes become, they look a little bit like microscopic dumbbells. So this is what it looks like on the back. That's what it looks like on the front. You can see those holes are there. They're gonna get opened up a little bit when we put our tapes through them. Your knife is a great tool for this. And then we're gonna work on this side. So we've determined we have approximately 5 centimeters from the edge of this spine fold to where we need to conclude our holes. So I'm gonna go ahead and mark that 5 centimeter mark. Okay, I'll double check that I marked that correctly. I did. So I'm gonna draw a very light line just in those places. This is what my brain is thinking. I'm gonna re-enter here. I'm going to exit, and then I'm going to re-enter. So what I'd like to do is do something a little fun at these 2 intersections. And so what I'm gonna do is, instead of doing straight cuts like I've done over here, I'm gonna do diagonal cuts. What does that end up looking like? We shall see. So essentially I'm gonna do the same math that I did on the other half. So here and here. But I'm gonna also draw another line a little bit closer to this side and closer to this side, so I can have my diagonals. And I'm gonna draw those just 5 millimeters off. Again, this is completely optional. You can do whatever you would like to your covers. You can replicate this over here. Or you can get fancy with it. So let's get fancy here. What I'm gonna do is, and you don't even really honestly have to draw this in here, but I wanna draw it in so I understand what I'm doing. And I'm gonna make these mirror images of each other. But have fun with this part. And if I felt like I would like these also to be diagonal, I can do the same math on that one. In fact, let's just make it a little different on this side. We have the opportunity. So let's see what that looks like. This won't affect the structure. It's just gonna distinguish the front from the back cover a bit more. So we'll have there, and we'll have, oh, different direction, here. So again, I'm just gonna punch the holes, and I'm gonna be vigilant that I'm punching at the right intersections. All these lines on here, this would be very easy to screw up. And that's something I would, of course, find a way to do. Okay, and then you can come in from this side again and really expand those holes. And then I'm gonna connect those. Last step, go ahead and erase all of your guidelines. Anything you don't want to be showing on the inside of your book. Be gentle, you don't want to rip anything or cause any unwanted creases. I missed. Now that I have all of my cover prepared, I'm just gonna slide in the tapes, or slide on the cover, whichever seems like it's gonna work better for you. And I'm going to just jog all this paper so that it's really in the spine as far as possible. From here, I'm gonna give my tapes just a little bit of a haircut. I think this should help me. And sometimes what I like to do is get in here either with my awl to open this up or my knife tip to open this up. Your knife tip, you have to be a little bit careful. Sometimes I use my bone folder. Again, you just have to be a little bit careful. There are tools that are really good for this. This is a micro spatula is what it's called. And sometimes it's good for helping you get your tapes in. That went way too easy. So I'm just gonna slowly introduce that tape into the hole. And I'm gonna do this one on this side as well. So open that up with my micro spatula. Very carefully feed that in. You don't wanna rip these holes. So you can see it's already starting to look quite lovely. Now I'm gonna work from this side and open that up just like I did before. And I'm just going to keep weaving until all of my tapes are in place. And that is our book.